Actually, I'd like to play the trailer for this film, and then what I want to do is go over, because you outline, I think it's about 9 or 10 bullet points that you consider are really major signs of the times, signs of the last days, and as time permits here, we're going to talk about some of those.
There is a sense in the world. There's a sense among believers, there's a sense among unbelievers, there's a sense among all peoples that things are unhinged. The Middle East is unhinged with uprisings, revolutions, and where's this heading?
How are followers of Jesus to relate to all of these things? How do they relate to biblical prophecy?
America is in spiritual, moral crisis. Values are changing, and so rapidly, that have not happened in the history of man.
How are level-headed, responsible Christians to relate to the testimony of the biblical prophets and the unfolding of chaos throughout the world?
Not just believers are wondering, is this a sign of the end?
Very fast-moving. How'd you come up with this film idea?
Over the past several years, as someone who, has been traveling across the country and across the world teaching on the issue of end times, I have observed a profound disconnect between that part of the church, which is primarily focused on missions and the gospel and church planning globally, and that part of the church that is focused primarily on the study of prophecy in the end time. And I'm convinced that those two portions of the church, they need to be united, and there's a synergism that I believe the early church walked in between prophecy and the going forth of the gospel that needs to be reclaimed. And so the goal of the film was to travel throughout the Middle East, talk to all these different leaders throughout the Middle East since the Arab Spring, the new Middle East since the Arab Spring, and ask, how is biblical prophecy being fulfilled in our midst in order to convey the urgency of the hour? Because I'm convinced that if the gospel-centered part of the church gets a hold of the end-time message, it will add fuel, it will add urgency to their mission, and I believe the prophecy crowd needs to get away from simply looking at the signs, and they need to understand how those things are to motivate them to get off of their couches and get involved in what God's doing throughout the earth. And so that was the goal behind the film, and I think we accomplished that partially. I actually have another film that will be coming out later this year that really sort of completes the message that we began to convey in End Times Eyewitness.
Okay, is the best place to get this WND.com, though?
Yeah, you can get it at WND.com. You can also get it on Amazon. iTunes and Amazon have instant download if you want to just download it that way, or you can buy the DVD from WND or Amazon.
All right. You focus in on a lot of what you consider to be major end-time signs. Frankly, Joel, we could talk about 20, 30 of these signs. I think you focus on probably less than 10. Let me just highlight some of them. The rebirth of Israel, steps towards a rebuilt temple, the rise of false prophets, Daniel 11 and the Arab Spring, the rise of Turkey, the rise of ISIS, the rise of anti-Semitism, the fact that Isaiah 19 may be beginning to unfold, and I think that really unfolds in the tribulation and the millennium. There certainly could be some stage setting going on. But I want to go back for just a minute, and let's just spend a literal minute on this, because you referenced it a second ago, and that's the Arab Spring, because that changed everything in the region we're talking about. I don't think the Arab Spring could have happened without the cooperation of U.S. leaders. So what were your thoughts as you saw that begin to unfold?
It was amazing. Obviously, with the change of regime or the change of administration here in the West, there was a different approach. We began turning against these various sort of dictators that controlled most of the Middle Eastern nations and trying to support these allegedly moderate Islamic regimes. That was the approach of the Obama administration. The results have been catastrophic.
Yes.
We've destroyed much of the Middle East, in fact.
That's right.
The reason that I connected that to Daniel 11 specifically is because Daniel chapter 11 highlights the clash in the last days between what's called the king of the north and the king of the south. And really just 2 years ago, whether we're dealing with that region of what was the Seleucid dynasty, that's Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, and then the king of the south, which is Egypt, 2 years ago they were great friends. But since the Arab Spring, we now see this tremendous regional enmity that has arisen to where you have President Sisi of Egypt referring to the president of Turkey, President Erdogan, each referring to each other as dictators, open hostility between these two nations. And I'm not saying that this is that, but what I'm saying is this may be that the general landscape of the end times as described in Daniel 11 is coming into focus. And so we as watchmen need to pay attention to these things and ask, is this that? And if so, how will it affect us in the way of urgency?